Hello, everyone, and welcome to Integration Down Under September 2021. I know we had one last week and we've got one this week, so they're pretty close together, but we got a really good topic tonight. Our organizers are Martin, Dan, Renee, Wagner, and myself. Tonight's speaker is Amrit, and Dan and I have both worked with Amrit at Mexia. And Amrit's now working with Velrada, and he's doing a lot of work around Logic Apps Standard and some Azure Bicep pieces. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Amrit. And,
thank you.
And Dan and I I will just set it to where it's your screen. I'll leave Dan and I in there, but I'll set it to where it's just your screen. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Hello, everyone. So I have been recently working with Logic App Standard, doing a lot of stuff. So I thought I'll share my knowledge with the community. So welcome to Logic App Standard, CICD with Bicep. So we're gonna go through all the steps that we need to do with Logic App Standard. So I'm working with Velrada as a senior integration consultant in their Melbourne office, and my details are on the screen if you want to contact me. So these are the prerequisite for this session. If you're not familiar with these technologies, it won't stop you from following along. But if you are familiar, it will help you get most out of this session. So I hope you guys, I'm not going to go into detail what Logic App Standard is. I hope you have attended some past webcasts on integration down under. You have basic knowledge what Logic App Standard is, how it is different from consumption based. And I'm using Bicep, Azure Bicep for my templates. But if you are never used Bicep, you're familiar with ARM template, that should be all right. So they're very similar. And I'm using YAML pipeline to deploy my stuff. But if you are familiar with the classic DevOps pipeline, that should be fine as well. And so there were two biggest concern with Logic App consumption that I think Microsoft has addressed. One was around local development, and the other one was around CICD. So you have to put Logic App inside the ARM template, each Logic App. So that was painful process, right? So if you wanted to make changes to Logic App later on. So with this new Logic App Standard, there is a separation of concern. So your operations specialist can set up infrastructure pipeline that will provision all the infrastructure like Logic App, storage account, all the application inside, and then developers can set up separate pipeline which will deploy your workflows, right, on that infrastructure that has been already set up. Yeah, but I'm using just one single pipeline which will set up infrastructure, plus it will deploy the workflow, but you can separate them if you want. And this is the Logic App project structure. If you never work with Logic App Standard, so this is the project structure. So you have artifacts folder, underneath you have maps and schemas, and then you can have, with consumption app Logic App, there is a one-to-one relationship between one Logic App has one workflow, but with Logic App Standard, you can have many workflows in one Logic App, very similar to function app. So you can have like many functions inside one function app. And then there is a connection.json file, there's host.json file, and the local settings file. So, and this is, there's a little bit difference between how API connections are used in Logic App Standard from Logic App Consumption, because Logic App Consumption is hosted by Microsoft. So the connection, the trust between connection and Logic App is established by Microsoft. But here in Logic App Standard, we are responsible for hosting a Logic App. It could be hosted in Azure or could be hosted in Azure Arc or on Kubernetes. So we need to make sure that our Logic App can access the connection. So on the left-hand side is a structure of a Logic App project. So we can have multiple workflows, and then there is a connection.json file. So connection.json file is a metadata about the connection. So if you're familiar with Logic App consumption, you might have noticed that at the bottom of the Logic App consumption, there is a metadata of connections, right? Like which resource group, which the connection name your workflow is going to use. So it's very similar. So the Logic App team, what they did, Microsoft, is they've taken out of the workflow and put it in a one common file. So instead of having inside each workflow in Logic App Standard, now it lives in one connections.json file. And it's just a metadata about all the API connections that we have. And our workflows run on Logic App, and Logic App runs on hosting plan, and we need to specify a storage account because now we are hosting the Logic App, so we are responsible for the storage of logs. And then MSI, we grant permission to the connections. Now, because we are hosting the Logic App, so the connection can't trust the request coming in. So we have to give the permission to that Logic App so it can communicate with the connection. And your connection actually points to your service. Could be SFTP, it could be the SAP system, or any connection that you're using, service bus or blob, right? And this is the demo workflow that we are going to do today. So I'm using, it's just a timer trigger workflow, and it's just listing the blobs in a container, and then it's going to send the name of the file that it finds in that blob to a service bus. So let's start. Okay, one more thing. So these are my goals that I want to achieve with this CI/CD pipeline. Because with Logic App Standard, you can leverage now key vault reference. So we can, in the app setting, point to a key vault, and instead of storing the actual secret connection strings in the app setting, we can store in key vault and then add reference. So I want to leverage that. So I don't want any secret connection string in my Logic app setting. I want all that in the key vault. And I want the ability to package my Logic App once in the build and then deploy that package to each environment, dev, test, prod. And I want a very simple release process so that if later on I add more workflows, if later on I want to add, let's say, function app, I don't need to change my CI/CD pipeline. So I should be able to, use the same CI/CD pipeline with very minimal changes. Of course, if you're adding a function app, you have to add some step to build it, right? So, but I don't want to make wholesale changes to my release pipeline. So those are my 3 targets. So let's jump back to Visual Studio. And because of the time frame that we have, so what I did is I got this repository, and I already have deployment folder which contains all my Bicep templates, and my pipeline folder which contains all my YAML pipeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these once we create our Logic App and make sure our Logic App is ready to deploy. So I will go through these templates. So it's quite a number of templates. So I got a number of modules. Won't be feasible to design them in this session. So if you see under source, I have this Logic App folder, but it's empty. There is nothing there. So let's add the Logic App to it. So I have already installed Logic App Standard extension, Logic App Standard extension that's required. So, and if we click on Azure extension and we go to Logic App and I say create new project, and then it's going to ask where you want to put that project. So I want to put that in the source Logic App folder, and then it's going to ask what type of workflow you want to create. I want to skip for now, and it will start creating the project. So if we go back now, and so it created all the artifacts that, all the structure and everything. And now let's add a workflow to this lot. There's no workflow at the moment, so let's go and add a workflow. So if we click on this, okay, so we click here, and okay, so I think there is a bug in this slot extension at the moment. So what we have to do really is, if I reveal an Explorer, and if I go and open this in Visual Studio, then I should be able to add, yes. I think there is some issue that happened, maybe with initializing. Let's delete everything, and let's start fresh here. And let's say create new, yep, here, stateful, and let's call it workflow blob to service bus. And it finished the project this time. Now we can right click and open in Designer. It takes a couple of seconds to load, and it's asking whether I want to use Azure connectors or not. I'm going to skip for now, just to demonstrate what is the difference between different kind of connectors in Logic App. So I have already set up my dev storage account, resource group, and I got storage account, and I got a service bus just to do my local development, right? So I got a container here. I want to list all the files in this container, and then I'm going to send a message to this service bus. So I got this resource group created upfront. So now it's a timer trigger, and I'm fine every 15 minutes, and let's save this. And now there's a concept of built-in connector and Azure connector. So you need to understand that to understand how the CICD work for Logic App Standard. So let's explain that. So now if you notice, I only get built-in here. There is no Azure here, right? So now if I want to list blob, let's say I say blob, I got a built-in connector blob. And if I click on this, you notice that I only have 4 actions. There is no action called list blob. So what Azure Microsoft Logic App team has done is they have built quite number of built-in connectors, but they are limited at this stage. My understanding is they will keep adding more and more actions, keep adding more and more connectors going forward. But at this stage, you have to mix and match. So these connectors that are built in, they run on Logic App. So where you deploy Logic App, you don't need to create a separate connector that we used to create in Logic App consumption, right? But I want list blob, which is not here. That means I have to use Azure connector. So how to get that? Let's save that for now. And if you right click and say use connector from Azure, it will say, okay, use connector. It will ask you which subscription you want to connect and which resource group you want to connect. So I'm connecting to my dev resource group that I showed you earlier. And now it's the connectors are now enabled. It's saying reload your designer. Let's open the designer again. And let's click on blob now. You notice I got an Azure option here, because I enabled Azure for this workflows, right? So now if I go on here, I got a blob option. And now notice that here, there are a number of different actions. It's a lot more than built-in connector. But this is a external managed connector. So you're gonna pay separately from your Logic App plan, depending how many calls you make. So I'm gonna use list blob action. And now it's going to ask me the connection name. So it's, let's say, Azure blob connection, and there is no managed identity at this stage. So I'm going to access key, and then it's going to ask the storage account name. I'm going to go back, and this is the name of my storage account, and then it's going to ask the connection string. Let me grab the connection string from here. Yeah, the connection string I copied, and I say create connection. Now keep an eye here. So if I go back, so see there is no connector here. It's gonna create a connector here for me. So if I go back and I say create, it's creating failed account info. Okay, let's see if I got the right connection string. Permission. Oh, that's strange. Okay, let's see.
Amrit, you're giving it the connection string, not the key.
Oh, okay, yes. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, it doesn't need. I'm giving the connection string, so it only need the key. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, it only need this. Create. Yeah, and now if I come back, if I refresh, you notice that it created this connection, API connection for me. And you also notice not yet. So it's gonna asking me what storage account I want to use. So I don't want to use this from my connection, because in my test environment and in my production environment, my connection storage account going to be different, right? So I'm gonna enter a custom value, and in the expression, if I go, so I'm gonna say because my connection, my storage account is going to be different between different environments. So I'm gonna say, okay, this is going to come from app settings. So and name of my app setting is going to be storage underscore account underscore name. So that is, it's going to come from app setting, and the name of the app setting will be this. So that's all good. And then it's asking the folder name. My folder name is going to be this, all environments. So I'm happy with that. So, and no paging, no flat listing, all good. And now if I save that, just keep an eye here. There's no connection.json file at the moment. As soon as I hit save, I should get a connections.json file here. That this is just metadata about my connection. The connection that I have here, this connection, it's just pointing to, if I do this, it's pointing to where my connection lives, which resource group it lives, and the connection has a runtime URL. So it's using that. And now I'm happy with this. I've saved it. Now I want to, this is list blob is going to return all the files that are in that container. I want to send them to a service bus. And if I say service bus, this time I wanted to send a message, and I have a send in my built-in connector. So inside the built-in connector, service bus, I have send a message. So I don't want to create manage connector, because I'm happy with send message from the built-in. So it's gonna ask me the name of the connection, and then I'm gonna say service service bus connection, and it's asking me for connection string. So I'm gonna go back, And this time here, no, I don't want to create. Oops. Yeah, primary connection string. I'm gonna copy that and put it here. And yeah, it created. Now it's asking me the name of the topic, the queue or the topic name that I want sent to. So what I want to do is I just to show that how parameters work. So I'm not going to hard code the queue name here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on parameter and create a parameter, and the name is service bus queue name, and it's be a string. Let me go back and queue, copy this name, come back, enter the value here, right? So yeah, and it's gonna start showing me the parameter that I have, right? But just pay attention here, there's no parameters file at this stage, but as soon as I hit save, it created this parameter file. So what it is put that actual value here, and my workflow is using that parameter. So if I'm using this queue name in 5 workflows, I don't want to hard code in 5 places, so I can put it in a parameter file. So now what I want to do is I want to send the content. In the content, what I want to send is from the list blob, I want to send the display name. Now, list blob is returning an array, so automatically Logic App has put this in for each loop, and it's going to send display name of each the file that it found there to the service bus. So let's hit save. And now if I go back to connection.json file, you notice that this time, instead of creating the connection for service bus under manage API connection, which has only one blob, it created it under service provider connection. Now these connections are a lot simpler, and it didn't created anything here. If you notice for service bus, but all it needs is the service bus connection string, right? So it said, I need this service bus connection string. Now I want to rename this just to keep it consistent with my other service underscore bus underscore connection string. So, and I also it copied that same thing here. So I'm gonna just update, look for my local development as well, right? So now I'm ready. My connection.json file is just metadata about all my connections, right? Now I want to prepare my Logic App for my deployment, for the deployment to my test and production environment. But I don't want, so if you look here, this connection.json file has my subscription ID, and it's got Australia Southeast. When I deploy to test and production, I might be deploying to Australia East. I might be deploying, definitely my production subscription might be different. And also my resource group will be different, right? So I don't want to use this connection.json file. Now I'm going to parameterize the connection.json file, but I don't want to touch this connection.json file. There's nothing sensitive information here. So I'm going to check this in to my source control so that my colleague or I can check out this code on some other machine, and I should be able to run my workflow, right? Because my workflow is using this connection.json file. So I don't want to touch this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file here. I'm going to call it connections dot Azure capital Azure.json, right? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to Control C. Oops, not inside the workflow. So I'm going to copy, move. outside the workflow, right? So connections.json, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to parameterize all these settings. So for example, this is my subscription ID, right? So already here, Logic App team has this workflow subscription ID. So I'm going to use the same naming convention. So I'm going to say here that this value is going to come from app settings, not settings, setting, always confusing. And my location, so I might be deploying to different location. So I'm going to say that this also is going to come from my app setting. So I'm going to tell where I'm deploying. So that is my workflow location. This is fine. This is Azure Blob. And I'm going to copy this same thing and replace this thing here. Now my resource group is going to be different for each environment, right? So this is also, I'm going to parameterize. This all things will be taken care by my CICD pipeline when I'm creating the infrastructure. I make sure that all these settings are already there in the app setting. Now this connection name, I don't want to have this connection name. I want to follow my naming standards that I follow for other resources. So my connection name is also going to come from the app settings. And this URL definitely going to be different for each environment. So I'm gonna replace this as well. I'm saying it's gonna come from app settings. So after I create a connection, and one other thing is that for local environment, for local development, Logic App team is using the raw authentication. But when I'm deployed to Azure, I'm going to use managed identity. So I'm going to give my Logic App access to this connection. So I want to use that. So I'm going to get rid of this. So now my whole connection string, connection.azure file has been parameterized. Now I'm ready to deploy this to my higher environment, right? So everything is parameterized here. All the things I'm going to show you how I'm adding these things to my app settings. But now my this thing is ready. One thing being from BizTalk background is that this workflow, it keep, like if you notice this, Microsoft team has created artifacts folder and maps under that, but the workflows, it keep adding at the root. So if you have a 10 workflow, it's gonna all show up here. So what I want to do is I'm gonna create a folder called, no, not under artifacts. So I'm gonna at root. So I'm gonna call it work flows, and I'm gonna move this workflow inside that so that I can have, I can keep adding as many workflows that I want. Now my parameter file is there. My connection.azure file is parameterized, and I'm happy. I can check in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check in these changes so that my build starts. So if I come here, you see there is no build running previously. So I'm going to check in these changes so that build starts while I go through. I go through this my template and my pipeline, right? So let's check in these changes. So I'm gonna stage all the changes. I think all the changes got staged, and say Logic App Dev, right? So that's it. And let's push these changes to here. Workflows, yeah, everything looks okay. And let's just verify that it started building and deploying. Let's jump back to, let's close this Visual Studio, come here. Now I'm gonna walk you through my Bicep. So what I'm doing is I'm leveraging the main Bicep concept. So I'm deploying everything through my main bicep. So my release pipeline is just calling my main bicep, and my main bicep is then calling these modules in the sequence that I want, right? So I walk you through my main bicep, nothing but just some environment variables, and I have component name integration down under. You can call it purchase order, work order, whatever, and yeah. And then I'm controlling all the resource names from one single location. My app service plan name, my logic app, my key vault, all the names from one location. I prefer that, and all my secret names from one location, and my connection names from here. So first thing I'm doing is I'm creating an Azure Key Vault because I wanted to leverage Key Vault and store all my settings there. So if I go to this module, very simple, it's accepting a name of the Key Vault, and then it's creating this Key Vault, right? And then it's returning the name of the Key Vault back. And then here I'm creating a storage account. And if I go, I'm just creating a storage account V2, right? And then I'm creating the containers. The container I showed you in my dev environment. So I'm creating that container in my test production environment, right? And after creating the storage account, I'm adding the connection string of my storage account to Key Vault. So I'm passing the Key Vault name here and passing the secret name. So I'm creating the connection string to that Key Vault after creating the storage account. And then I'm creating the application app inside. I'm creating an app inside here and doing the same thing I did with storage account. I'm adding the instrumentation key to my Key Vault because I don't want in the app settings. And then I'm creating a service bus because I'm sending a message to service bus. I'm creating a service bus, creating a queue, and then I'm adding the connection string of the service bus to Key Vault, right? And then I'm creating logic app connections. If you notice here, it created, because it failed, right? A couple of times, so it created more. So I want to create this connection, my test, my production through my ARM template, right? Here in the dev, my logic app created from my Visual Studio, but in my test and production, I wanted to create from my ARM template. So what I'm doing is I'm creating that connection. Keep in mind that this connection is type V2, kind V2. That is for logic app standard. Consumptions based logic app kind is V1. I'm giving the storage account name and I'm giving the key. And then I'm returning the property, that I showed you in my connections.json file. So I need the connection runtime URL. So what I'm doing is after I create my connection, I can access the runtime URL. So it's here. If I show you blob 3 property, this is the connection URL. So what I'm doing is after I create it, I'm returning that connection URL because I need to put it in the app settings. Now my connections has been created, and I'm creating an app service plan. It's a special kind of app service plan called workflow standard. I'm creating that app service plan and returning the ID of that app service plan, server farm ID, because I need it for logic app. And the final bit is I'm creating my logic app here. So let's go here to my logic app. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating my logic app, just a blank logic app. There is nothing. Only thing is that it's a system. I'm assigning the system identity, and I'm setting the server farm ID. That's it. Just a blank logic app, right? Now I'm giving access to my to Key Vault, get and list access for my logic app. The logic app that I created here, I'm giving the access to read the secret from Key Vault. And then I'm applying app setting. Just pay attention a little bit here. I'm doing this in 3 steps. Why I'm doing in 3 steps is I can move these app settings as a child resource of this logic app, right? But the issue is, as soon as when I'm creating this logic app, while I'm provisioning this logic app doesn't have permission to Key Vault because I'm just provisioning it, right? And what happens is when you're provisioning, logic app try to validate this connection string. And this connection string is coming from Key Vault. Now, because when I'm provisioning, it doesn't have access to key vault, and my provisioning fails. It's saying this your storage account connection string is invalid, right? So that's why I split it into 3 steps. I create just blank logic app, then I give that logic app permission to key vault, and then I apply app settings. Now, when I apply app setting, at this stage, my logic app has permission to key vault. So it can read this connection string from key vault. And if you notice here is all the app settings that I'm doing. So all the app setting that I said in my connections.azure file, here I said subscription ID, the workflow location, the blob connection name, the connection URL, the resource group name. I am where it is, logic app. So I'm setting all those properties. So I'm getting subscription ID, resource group name, location, and all my blob related properties, right? The storage account name, the connection name, and the blob. Now, finally, I'm giving access. Now, this is the step I was talking, that you need to give access to logic app to the connection. So if I show you here, in connection V2, there is an option called access policy. So you need to give access to the logic app so that logic app can use this connection, right? Otherwise, your logic app will not be able to use this connection. So I'm doing that. So I'm giving the logic app access to my connection that I created in my connection. That's pretty much it in my main bicep. And then I'm returning the logic app name because I need it as an ARM output to deploy my actual logic app, right? That's my ARM template. And now let's quickly see what I'm doing in the pipeline. So first, my entry point is the pipeline. First stage is build stage, right? So in my build stage, I'm copying all the files from my deployment folder because I need my bicep template to deploy everything. So I'm copying all the files, and then I'm calling this template called package logic app.yaml, which is here. So here I'm packaging my logic app. So it's not a function app, so you can't build it and publish it. You need to manually package the file. So what I'm doing is I am copying all these files. So just if you notice here, I'm not copying connections.json file because that is only for my local development. I don't want to use connections.json for my test and production. I'm copying connection.azure.json, and I'm copying parameter file, and I'm copying it to a folder called build.buildid. Now I'm copying all the workflows that I have under my workflows folder. So could be one in this scenario, but you could have 5, 10 workflows. So I'm copying all the workflows, and then I'm renaming the connect. After copying, I'm renaming the connection.azure to connections.json file because my logic app, when deployed, will look for connection.json file, right? So I'm renaming after copying it, and then what I'm doing is I'm packaging it up. My build folder, my build.buildid folder, and that's it. And then I just publish it, right? So I just publish it by my other stages. Then I have my release.yaml file, which is here. It's again very simple, just some properties like what is the resource group name, location, my connection name, everything. And what I'm doing here is first task, I'm downloading the artifact that my build stage has produced. And then I am using Azure CLI task. And what I'm doing is I'm creating the resource group. It's not ARM task, so it won't create a resource group. I have to create it. And then I'm doing AZ deployment group create. And I'm pointing to my main.bicep file. I'm saying start executing my main.bicep. And then my main.bicep then internally call all the modules, right? And I'm passing the resource group name G, and I'm passing some parameters here, right? So if you see in my main.bicep, so I have some external parameter like release ID. right? And location code. I have default values for most of the thing, but I wanted to overwrite release ID, right? That's what I'm doing here. So I'm passing the build number, and on my environment, whatever environment is here, test, prod, and I'm passing that. Then I'm giving the name to my deployment. So I'm giving, there is a name here, main dash build number, and then this will deploy all my resources for me. So it will set up all my infrastructure. And then what I'm doing is I'm getting the ARM output, because I need the name of the logic app that I created to actually deploy the package, right? So I'm getting the ARM output. And then I'm using the function app task. At the moment, logic app team doesn't have dedicated task to deploy logic app standard. I think they're working on it, but I'm using function app, and I'm giving its type is function app, and I'm giving the logic app name, the ARM out Bicep output, and I'm then giving saying build.build.zip file, do a zip deploy, and it will deploy my logic app. Let's see, hopefully, if everything worked as expected. I came back, it built my package, it built my logic app, published my artifacts, it deployed to test environment. And if I show you downloaded artifact and then deploy Bicep, it deployed the Bicep and then got the ARM output, deployed my logic app, and did the same thing for production, right? Now let's head back and see whether we got two new resource group created here. We should have, if I search IDU, I think that's what I called. I have two new resource group, test and prod. Let's go to test first. And if you see, all my resources got created, right? For me, got key vault, got connection. And if I go to my connection, you notice here, I have access policy. My logic app has access to this connection. And if I go to key vault and show access policy, my logic app has get and list to list the secret, right? I'm not authorized, so I can't see the secret. And if I show you my logic app now, the configurations first, there will be no secret inside my logic app. Everything which is sensitive, if you see tick mark, it's coming from key vault. All the non-sensitive information like the workflow location, resource group name, subscription ID, they're here, the storage account name. But anything sensitive like service bus, instrumentation key, storage connection string, everything is coming from key vault at runtime. So happy with that. And if I go to connections, let's go parameter first. You see the parameter is here. Go to connection. It's saying it's connected. This is the name, display name. And we can look at the JSON view, and you see all the variables are parameterized. So there is nothing hard-coded or here in my connections.json file, it's parameterized, right? So now if I go to my workflow and I go workflow, hopefully it's healthy and it should have executed once, I guess. If I go here, yeah, it executed once, but because I didn't upload any files to that container, so it didn't produce any result, right? So let's do a quick thing. I'll just upload two files to show you. And IDU and this storage account, container, logic app, upload, desktop. I just put some file, open, upload, upload. So I got two files now. They're just blank, one line in it. Now go back and run it again. hopefully, if I provided all the connection strings correctly, it will run my logic app. It executed, got 2 files this time, and I sent a message. Each file name, test file 1 and test file 2, to my service bus queue. So other workflows can listen to it, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think we are on time, pretty much. So I achieved all my goals that I had, that leveraging the key vault for increased security, and I packaged my logic app once in my build, and my release pipeline process is very simple. Now I can go back and add more workflows. I can add 2, 5, 4, and I don't have to change anything in my release pipeline. All I have to do is, if I'm adding more managed connections, I just have to update my connections dot Azure file and parameterize, depending, maybe I'm connecting to SFTP or whatever I'm connecting to, and that's it. My CICD pipeline will work seamlessly without any changes. Yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. I hope you enjoyed this session. Any questions?
No, we don't have any questions on the pane so far. Anybody got questions? If you just type them into the comments on the YouTube Live, they'll come up in here. Thank you very much. That was good. You can answer one of my questions is, how do you make that YAML build separate for your build and release?
You mean this one?
When it actually runs. If you go,
you mean here? If
yeah,
I go back.
Yeah, because for some reason everybody doesn't want to deploy to test and prod every single time they run a build.
That I think is still an issue. So when you are triggering from here, not here. So if I say run new, you can select the stages that you want to deploy, but you can untick prod. But the problem is it will skip prod, but then you can't come back and say now deploy to, how do we in the classic pipeline? You cannot do that. So you have to start from the very first step again.
So that's one of the things that I've still not. I use YAML for builds, but I still use the Azure DevOps release for the release.
Yeah. Previously, what used to happen when you skip it, they used to say failed. I think they addressed that. Now it says skipped, but then you can't click and say later on and say now I'm ready to deploy to prod, right?
Yeah, and if you the other ones that I've done is, if you go set the environments up to say, okay, before you deploy to prod, ask for approval.
Yes. Yeah.
But the problem is the build stays running the whole time.
Yeah. If you put a long 30 days approval, it will start. It will show you that it's still running, right? So
okay, we've got a question. Can we leverage integration account in Logic Apps Standard? I don't see that. Like to use it like we do in consumption.
I'm not really sure about that, but I think because
I can answer that one for you.
Yeah.
So you don't need the integration account anymore for maps and schemas. In the standard, but you still need the integration account for your EDI.
Yeah, and
so your agreements and things. And so what you can do is it sets up a connection in there, just like it does to any other adapter. It sets up a connection to your integration account so that you can then pull that information from there to do the EDI pieces. The flat file is an interesting one because the flat file, at least last time I looked, wasn't available for standard.
I think it's still not available.
Yeah, and because
yeah.
the comment I got from one of the people that knows is that the flat file decoder and encoder are using BizTalk DLLs, and they don't know how to package them for the consumption model where you can run it in a container and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. So they didn't come up with anything new when they did the flat file decoder. They just grabbed the DLLs from BizTalk.
Yeah.
So so that's the thing. So yeah, you don't need the integration account for schemas and maps. So that's one of the advantages. If you have that saves you the integration account when you don't have EDI.
EDI requirements, yeah. If you just want to use, I have used for one customer liquid maps here. So as soon as you add a liquid map here, it will start showing you in the drop down in your workflow. So
yep.
Yeah.
And Nick's got a question. What would you say the biggest advantage of this approach using Bicep versus traditional approach out of the box DevOps release pipeline tasks and pipeline variable groups?
I think you will still need
all the cool kids are using Bicep.
Yeah, but I think there's no out of the box feature to provision your resources. You still have to either write ARM template or you have to write Bicep, right? So I made the switch from ARM template to Bicep, and I found them very, very easy to create and work with compared to ARM. But you still need to have ARM, right? So I don't think there is anything out of the box for provisioning all your function apps or logic app or storage account. So you still have to write that. So yeah.
Doesn't the Bicep also take away some of the pain that we have with logic apps in ARM templates? Doesn't that help with some of that, with the like escaping characters and stuff like that?
Yeah. I think I one example I can show you is here in my for example in my logic app. For example, there is this thing, right? This thing always comes as an error in ARM template. So if I have this in my app settings in my ARM template, my whole template shows red. It shows that there is something wrong because I think it's starting with this, right? So, but with the biceps, it's all green. There is nothing wrong. If I change this, you see my bicep turn red. That means I can immediately know that it's some issue.
I tried to use Bicep on the project about 4 months ago, but the Bicep didn't support managed identity for logic app consumption.
Oh, now
you're using standard.
No. It works because now with Bicep 0.3, it has 100% parity with ARM template. So whatever you can do with ARM template, today you can do the same thing with Bicep. So I did a session at Velrada last week about Bicep. So I moved all my ARM template to Bicep. So so this same thing we can do for consumption base. So it's maybe you tried before 0.3 version, but there are few things built here. There are interesting, like if I go to connection, see this thing, it keeps showing that the kind property doesn't exist, even though it's a Bicep thing.
If you go look at the Bicep documentation, it doesn't have identity in it for logic apps yet.
Oh,
it works. It works because it doesn't show it for the ARM template either, but it works.
Oh,
So
okay.
the documentation is lagging behind a bit. That could just be the add-in for Visual Studio Code's a little bit behind too.
What I did is I moved all my integration related resources like logic app, function app, everything to Bicep, and I had no issues. All my ARM template that used to work, they're working with Bicep. So not even a single issue there.
One thing I will tell you to do is to go away from the access policies in Key Vault and start using the role assignments.
Okay. Yeah. Good tip. Yeah.
It's just because they lit it up about 9 months ago that you can use the access policies for your Key Vault, and it just makes it a bit easier because that way you just write a role assignment in there.
So you are giving the role to Logic App system identity, whatever app it provisions.
Well, so if you go back into your Key Vault just quickly in your screen, go to your Key Vault.
Key Vault here. Yeah.
So you see where you got access control up at the top there?
Here. Yeah.
So and if you go to click add on the role assignments.
Yeah. Add role assignment.
And if you go at the top roles there, you'll now see Key Vault Reader, Key Vault Secret Officer, Key Vault Secret User.
Key Vault Reader, yeah.
And you don't want that. You don't want Key Vault Reader.
Okay.
You need Key Vault Secret User if you want to read the secrets. Two down from where you're at.
This one.
Yeah, okay. I got caught by this one. So. So it just makes it easier because also you can, it's easier to put groups in and things like that, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but it's just something that I would look at to see how you do it in your Bicep to see if you can do the role assignment, which if there's 100% parity, it should work.
It should, yeah. Now with Bicep, you can target subscription level, tenant level, management group level. So
Well, I don't think there's any other questions. I'm going to swap the screen back over to mine and just want to thank Amrit for the presentation tonight. And basically, I really enjoyed that. And I don't know why I must have dropped Dan out of the stream.
My battery's failing.
Okay. So I'd like to thank you. And again, if you got anybody else is interested, the recording will be up in a couple of minutes because with the live, you just basically put the recording into our playlist and it shows up on Integration Down Under website. So you can do that. Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm going to end the broadcast now.
Great job, Amrit.